Hey, how y'all doing? Summer stretch about over. Good Lord, they're down south. They started school 2 weeks ago. That's like cussing out loud to the kids. You know, like, ah! And the teachers. And the teachers. So we need to pray for our teachers among us. Hey, this is really going to be kind of preaching to the choir, but relationships are so important, right? Relationships are crucial, especially in the church. But I want you to think about the power of these words. Think about how you feel when we say things like family, parents, siblings, spouse, an ex. Think about your friends, friendships that you have, coworkers, very relevant in our house right now, teammates, neighbors. Maybe you have some good feelings, some bad feelings about those relationships. Think about those we serve. Maybe in your workplace you have clients, customers, or patients. You may love them. You may not look forward to seeing them on some days. And then there are those who serve us. Maybe you go to a restaurant and you have a favorite server. I know Ross and I would go to IHOP, and our favorite server was on vacation last week. And you know, it's not sister. I don't know if she's a sister in the Lord or not, but the lady who served us was not our favorite. But we'll look forward to seeing her next time. She was fine. She was fine. Service stations. I don't know are service stations. Do we call it that? I don't know. First responders, people who serve our community. We get all kinds of emotions when we think about relationships that we have, maybe relationships that we wish we had, relationships that we had in the past. Relationships matter a whole lot, and certainly relationships matter a lot to God. We boil relationships really down to up, in, and out, right? It's just an easy way to think about the relationships that God cares most about in our lives. So the first and most important relationship to anyone is our relationship up with God. If we don't get that right, any horizontal relationship is at best incomplete and at worst broken and not the way it should be. Think about the problem of easy divorce in this country. It's just too easy. And not saying that it doesn't happen or shouldn't happen in some cases, but it's all too easy. Or just breaking up. Hear story after story after story of just couples who break up over text messages or whatever, right? But if we begin to get our relationship with God right, and we're growing in our relationship with God, then we'll have at least a better chance of getting, friendships and marriage and coworker relationships and all those types of things, right? So up relationship is our relationship with God. So here's the way we think about that, and it's not an us versus them kind of thing, but it is important to think of the relationships that we have with those inside the church as different than the relationships that we have with those outside the church. So in other words, when we see a brother or sister inside the church struggling with sin, we talk to them about it in a different way than we wouldn't talk about someone who is outside the church, right? So in our community groups, we talk about accountability. Well, we don't hold somebody who's not a follower of Jesus accountable to following Jesus. But if Leandra's on our accountability board, like we have that built into our accountability board, and Leandra sees me struggling with something, she better come and confront me about that. But she's probably not going to do that with her neighbor. So we have our relationship up with God, relationship in with those inside the church community, and then those outside the church community. And the Bible speaks very clearly. God has very specific ways which he addresses all three. We talked about the up relationship the first couple of messages in the series. Today we're going to talk about the inside relationships. And Elder Alfredo talked about a couple weeks ago the relationships with those outside. And then next week we'll end Romans 1:16, and we may even be throwing some hip-hop on y'all, so brace yourself for that. So here we are, message 7 of 8 in our summer series, 8 signposts of spiritual formation, and we're talking about building relationships this morning. Relationships that we have inside, as we said. So if we get this right, I really think that we're going to then have something that's very attractive to the community. And this is so important, right? Rather than being a deterrent. Oftentimes, what the church is in the community is a deterrent. And in many cases, rightfully so. So I do a lot of weddings, and I talk to a lot of young couples, like almost every week. And so I'm at a wedding last night, and they just didn't want anything to do, any mention of God. But it's interesting, I meet the parents. So the bride is half Polish and half Mexican. Her dad's from Mexico, her mom's from Poland. And it was really wild at the rehearsal. Both cultures talk very loud. And it was kind of chaotic, and you have some part of the family, they're speaking in Polish like really loud, and then some, Mexican, they're speaking really loud, and it was just kind of chaotic on top of that. And so I guess that kind of goes together pretty well. And but both come from some religious background for various reasons that the next generation doesn't want anything to do with. And so it's kind of sad. Like I think of, okay, well, so let's apply it in the family, right? So in my family, like if Jesus isn't really attractive in Laura and I, this is dangerous because my kids are in here, right? Then Ephraim and Elijah, probably they're going to be very influenced by, well, do they want to follow this kind of Jesus? So that makes sense, right? So as a church, if we get relationships with God and each other right, we're going to have something that is attractive to the community rather than being a deterrent. This is really important. I don't know how many of you are keeping up with news or church headlines. I don't know where you even read those, but it's funny. Elder Alfredo, he regularly sends me these things, and I should be more in touch with it. But just recently, there have been some very influential leaders, one right here in Gaithersburg, and another one very influential in kind of worship, known worship leader, who have just abandoned the Christian faith, like completely, like denounced things that they taught before. And so if there's ever a time to shine, it's now. In fact, I would say that to the degree that our relationships with one another is authentic and caring and loving, it will be the measure of how much difference we make in this community. So imagine this. Imagine a neighbor that you care about, or a family member, maybe somebody that you've been praying about or you would like to invite to church, or maybe you've invited before to an event or something. So imagine that person walks into a service here in the next few weeks, and they get maybe kind of a cold, the greeter's having a bad day, whoever that person is. We don't have those kind of greeters here, but just imagine, this is hypothetical, they get kind of an impersonal cold greeting, and then the people they see are kind of cold to one another, and are maybe, we have kind of a diverse group, but maybe this particular Sunday people are sitting around people that maybe look the same, and they stick to themselves, and when the service is over, man, people just kind of run for the door, and I'm not sure that I would want to come back to that kind of church. And when we were in between, so our family left the Chinese church that I was pastoring in 2014, and we had this very unique experience where we got to visit a lot of churches. And that framed a lot of my, that was a frame of reference for me about, okay, what kind of church do we want to envision? Pastor Rod and Pastor Bernard also got to do a little bit of that. And so we talk about those experiences and take from the good and say, no, we don't want to be like that. And there are some churches that, man, you go in and it doesn't seem like anyone talks to you, and then afterward people goes, or it's like really cliquey, and if you don't speak the right way or something, you don't fit in. But imagine this scenario. Your friend or neighbor or whatever walks into the building and they see all kinds of people from different backgrounds and cultures talking to one another, laughing, hugging, love a good church hug culture. And maybe some that are even praying for one another, crying with one another, being just warmly greeted and introducing. And in some cases, and I see this happen with some of you, where you're introduced to even someone else. Like, oh, Linda, let me introduce you to Leandra. Or you learn something about someone, and, oh, yeah, okay, Rod does this kind. Oh, let me introduce you to this person. Oh, you're a teacher. Oh, so-and-so is also a teacher. We're having a prayer meeting right over here for you guys. And then there's warm, authentic greeting and hugs during the take two. I love that we usually have to reel in the take two, even with just a small Sunday like this. I love that. And when service is over, most people just mingle around, talking, sharing, again, maybe praying with one another. It's not uncommon for, there to be some emotion as someone's maybe dealing with a hard time, and again, just talking, praying, hugging together. That might be a church I'd want to come back to. And I do, man, every week. That's our church, man. I love that. God's Word is filled with instruction about relationships that make that happen, and examples to follow, and in some cases, examples to avoid. And so let's lean in and listen to what God has to say from Romans 12. We're going to be in this passage, Romans 12, 9 to 21. It's a lot of verses, but it's short. It was written by the Apostle Paul. And in Romans, Paul lays down a gospel foundation personally in chapters 1 to 11. So what does the gospel have to do with me? Okay, and maybe that's not exactly the right way to say it. I mean, just to humanity, to those who are Jews, to those who are Gentiles. But then, practically, as it's applied in relationships in chapters 12 to 16 of Romans. So let's listen to God's Word together, and then we'll close with a very tangible action step that will help us put this into practice in our relationship. So starting in verse 9, I love this. Paul begins, love must be sincere. Anybody got a problem with that? I mean, I don't know that people actually teach, like, let's be hypocrites. And that's the idea, right? So this word for sincerity is really, it's like without hypocrisy, without a crack. It's unified, it's one, it's sincere. Man, I just want that. And sometimes I struggle with it. And even this morning, like, I don't know if you parents I don't know if this ever happens to any of you, but you just have a situation with one of your children and you just get frustrated. It never happened. Yeah. And so, like, it even happened to me this morning. Like, go figure. It happened to me this morning. And my reaction was just, the love of Jesus was not overflowing in that moment. And I can blame it on a lot of things, but it was pretty much just my flesh was just, the love of Jesus didn't come out. And I think that's why discipleship is primarily talked about in the Bible in the home. Like, the real transformation that happens in our lives happens in our home. So if at home we're a monster, and then we come on Sundays and we look real nice, then we are not loving with sincerity. We are actually living a hypocritical life. So I struggle a lot. It was actually right in this room in the house of God before we started. Just got frustrated with one of my children, to which I need to make that right. And so, and I think that's part of it too, right? It's not that we're perfect. We struggle. Sometimes we don't put on love, and we don't. So we just want to be the people that we say that we are, right? Love must be sincere. Listen to this. Hate what is evil. I don't know about you, but sometimes now evil here, we can push this kind of one way or another. So I don't know how many of you love horror movies, but like, it's always freaked me out. Like, I'll see a trailer for like some, like, I don't even know. Don't say a word. Don't shout out the name of the movie or whatever. I'll have nightmares. But it's like, it comes on and you're just like, it's freaky. So when I was growing up, it was like Freddy or like Friday the 13th. Who was that? Who was the Friday the 13th guy? Jason, yeah. The Mask, And locally, it was the local... Yeah, Okay, so hate what is evil, cling to what is good. And notice he says, verse 10, be devoted to one another in love. This is a phrase that would be used in a family setting, right? So we are the family of God. Be devoted to one another like a family is devoted to one another. Like, I don't get frustrated with my kids and say, well, enough with you, I'm moving, At least, most people don't do that. Actually, really, really sad story the other day. Just heartbreaking story. And if you know anyone that this would affect, please pass this on. But there was a 1-day-old baby that was abandoned. And so I don't know. I mean, we don't know. Like, we don't know the story. I haven't heard the follow-up to it yet. But thankfully, it was like left off in the woods. This man who was out there heard a baby crying, found it, Amazingly, the baby was fine, and he found the baby pretty soon and brought it to the hospital, and the baby was fine. And but there are, like, within 10 days, I don't know if it's Montgomery County or Maryland, but within 10 days, you can give up your baby. And so if you know, like if you meet, whether it's a teenager who gets pregnant, or I don't know, in this case, there's a little bit of conjecture that it was someone who may have either been in the country illegally or had like warrants or something. Or if you think about like some young lady, there could be a lot of reasons why they would be very, very afraid to not be known, right? And so then who knows? And it may have not even been her, right? It may have been the dad or someone who was doing something. I mean, you just can't fathom that, right? So this is like way out of the message, but by all means, if you know anyone in that situation, there is a system set up where there are people that are ready to take newborn babies. Praise God for that. That's a like angelic ministry. I don't know that it's a ministry, but it's awesome. So be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal. You ever struggle with motivation? Like I do these social media posts on Monday, the hashtag Monday Motivation. Like that's for me, man. I need motivation every Monday. And there's unique things depending on your career, right? Unique days, right, Del and Ross? Like as a teacher, there's some days are harder than others, right? And as a pastor, that's true. But that affects everyone probably at some time, you know. And Amir was in this like board meeting, you know, a few months ago, and it was just like, well, there's seasons, right? There's times that are maybe busier, that are just harder, and you don't always have the same kind of zeal. But here, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. It's easy to get lazy in our faith, but it's especially easy to get lazy in our faith when we're isolated. Like when I wake up and I don't feel good and I know no one's going to call me, or I don't have to give an account for those hours, it's just easy to be lazy. Especially when we're alone. Verse 12, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. And I'm so glad that this is worded this way. Paul doesn't say pray. Be faithful, be fervent, be devoted. This idea of the steadfast person of prayer. It's much more difficult I don't know what's the best way to say it. When I'm just hit or miss in prayer, it's easier to just fall off, right? But if I have a time set aside, or times, or throughout the day I have a routine, but also when I'm gathering together with people for prayer. I love that we do that. This morning I was so blessed just hearing the songs. I was actually thinking as we were singing one of the songs, I'm like, this is such a benefit in my life. Like, this is a benefit. I read these words, I'm singing them with my church family, and the gospel is so glorious. It's so glorious. The songs that we sang, it's just, I hope it blessed your soul. I hope it speaks to maybe a need that you have right now. So not just pray, but persist, be devoted. And I think it's not just alone, but gathering in groups. It's a powerful way to apply this. Right? How do you stay joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer? Well, if you're devoted with some other people, it's much easier to apply that. And then verse 13, share with the Lord's people who are in need, practice hospitality. I'm really low at hospitality, you can't even say it. Practice hospitality, and of course, it's impossible to do that alone. So we're going to apply this in the context of community, right? This is Authentic Community 101 from Paul the Apostle, Romans chapter 12. Relationships characterized by this kind of grace is what we were all created for. It's what your neighbor was created for. It's what the people in the Lakelands community right here are created for. Hopefully this week, I'm just waiting any day. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to reach back out to the principal here. She's probably incredibly busy, but hopefully by the end of this week, we'll be able to meet here, meet the administration, and kind of take a step in getting to know what the needs are here. But I know for a fact that every student here, every family, all the children that come here, they've all been created for this kind of community. And when you don't have it, that's the answer to why does a baby get left on the side of the road? Well, somewhere there's probably multiple people, maybe multiple generations that didn't have that. And so for some reason, they felt so desperate, so broken that they abandoned a one-day-old baby. Praise God it was found. I hope I'll hear the story of what happens to that baby. So this is why we're here. It's why we're here, to join God in restoring authentic community like Paul describes right here in Romans 12. All right, so he goes on, verse 14. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. I've mentioned over and over again, Elder Alfredo has kind of become my pastor. We were talking this Monday. I hope you don't mind me sharing this. And he was talking about just this idea of like you exercise the grace of God and you speak truth to people, and some people won't like you. And I tell you, I don't like that. Like, I don't know if you know the DISC personality profile, but I'm a very high D. That doesn't surprise anybody. But I'm a very high I on the DISC, if you know that. And high I, like I'm a really high. It's a scale of 48, and I'm like a 44. It's really, really high. Really low C, really low S. And that means I care a lot. Like, sometimes I struggle with it because I think, like, I see someone who lives in such a way, and it's like, man, they just really don't seem to care what people think. Like, they really... By the way they come across, they really don't seem to care. And sometimes I'm like, I'm just gripped because I care so much. And we all have different feelings on this, right? And so Elder Alfredo has really reminded me that, hey, speak the truth. And some people are not going to like you because of that. And they're going to label you for different things, different ways. I don't like that, but it's true. It's true. Bless and do not curse, he says. Hey, when they don't like you, don't curse back. Be surprised? No, don't be surprised. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. And do not be conceited. Now, for those who believe that we were all created in the image of God, okay, we preached a series in the book through the book of Genesis, talk about creation and all being created in the image of God. All of us, we are therefore to have equal regard for one another. This is not easy. Equal regard for one another. Hopefully next year we're going to do a series in James, and James really addresses the issue of wealth and how in the church we tend to treat people who look better, dress nicer, and have more, and give more. We have a tendency to treat them differently. Right? I mean, it's almost just natural, right? It's just kind of natural. Like, it's one of the reasons why, at least at this point, I don't know how much you give. And I don't want to know. Because I don't want to, Karen gives $10,000 a month, and then I'm going to talk to her differently. And when I travel, I'm going to think about getting her a gift, because, well, she was so generous to the church. I don't want to treat her that way. I want to treat her, maybe Leandra's, giving $25,000 a month, or whatever it might be. And then, and then Amir, our treasurer's, giving $10, and although now with our board, we want to have a little more accountability, but you understand, right? It's important that we have equal regard for one another. We owe everything to the grace of God. I mean, if you can give $10,000 a month, you can give by the grace of God. If you can only give $50 a month, we're talking about giving. That's not really the context here. But how we treat people, the opportunities that we have. Therefore, to have feelings of superiority is neither realistic or appropriate. To feel higher or better than anyone is not appropriate for a person who follows Jesus, or someone who believes that we've all been created in the image of God and that we have everything by the grace of God. So there are some very smart people in the room. There are some PhDs, in our church. There are some people that have very high authority in places. And just know that you have that because of the grace of God. And I thank God for that. I want to be not the smartest guy in the room. And thank God I rarely ever am. Like in my office, by myself, man, I am pretty darn smart. But, I want to be around people who are much smarter. And even this morning, Eric's out, hey, what do you think about this? Oh, great, that's a great idea. Because Eric thinks about things I don't think about. And when we pool, the intellect. Now, if you have that, that doesn't make you better. If you don't have it, it doesn't make you lower. I mean, it is interesting that Paul does use the phrase. He says, be willing to associate with people of low position. So that person who serves you, that person who's just cleaning up the trash, the bus person, that 50-year-old bus person at the restaurant who's barely making it. Like that person deserves our equal attention too. And it's just by the grace of God, they are where they are, we are where we are. And who knows what their story is? And I struggle with that, quite frankly. And maybe some of you do too. We owe everything to the grace of God, regardless of culture, background, no matter where you came from. Education, whether you have little education, didn't finish high school, or just barely finished high school, or whatever, advanced degrees, great, praise God for that. I don't know how I have multiple advanced degrees. I do not know how that happened. I was a drug addict in high school. I mean, nobody. I don't know, but it's just by the grace of God. By the grace of God, I was able to just easily get through high school. I am not joking. I never read a book in high school. Never. I never read a book. I knew where the Cliff's Notes section of the library was. I knew where that was. And if there was and I would be real smart if I had to write something and there was a movie about the book, I'm watching the movie. And I was just a good talker. I could just kind of talk my way through things. Believe it or not. Economics, right? If you have, great. You have by the grace of God. If you don't have, you're not any worse, right? Now, if you made some bad decisions, I've made some bad decisions over the last few years, correcting that. And living generously is the best feeling. Like when you can get out of living, for yourself and just collecting and trying to get somewhere and just live generously. And so if you have more, live generously. Geography, no matter where you live or where you don't live. It's in the context of these diverse relationships, right? In which true love for one another and our neighbors can be cultivated. So it's just like love on a wedding day. Just yesterday I said something like, what was their names? Jenny and Stephen. Jenny and Stephen, that a great marriage is built on love. And of course, you know that, right? And I was just talking to her grandparents before who've been married 48 years. And she's from Poland. It was so beautiful. And so, hey, Jenny and Stephen, your strong marriage relationship is going to be built on love. It's very different than today. Like today feels great. You look great. You smell good. People are attending to you. I mean, wherever you want your dress floofed, fanned off or whatever, that's what you get today. But then you're going to wake up and then, a few months from now, you're never going to have a day like this. And that's not the reality of true love. Celebrate that. Well, wedding day is great. Karen, Charlie just had their wedding day. It's beautiful. It's hot. Beautiful, Trying to fan, got fanned off a lot. 1 month ago today. 1 month anniversary. Woo! What's your secret? Don't answer that, Charlie. Don't answer that. It's just not reality, right? It's not reality. It's to be celebrated. It feels good, right? You wake up 5 years later, let alone 5 years later, let alone 5 weeks later, and it doesn't feel the same way about your spouse, right? So it's in our differences when life is challenging and we don't see eye to eye, that's when we begin to really love each other, right? So when I recognize that, okay, Laura, it's not that I need to correct Laura so she's more like me. I thought that. I really thought that early on. And then I started to realize, wait a minute, she's wired like this. She's different. So she needs me to love her in a way that's not natural or normal for me. And then when I start to lean in and I start to learn how to love like that, now she really is starting to feel loved, not just liked. And vice versa. So we apply that in the church too, right? We're different. Marcy and I had a glorious conversation about this earlier. And I just want you to know, we're in process here. I'm in process. Marcy's in process. Our team, we're in process of learning. How do we love people that think differently, that communicate differently than us? And you know what? Especially when we're really trying to be, a church that embraces all people, we're going to mess up sometimes. Like I'm going to say something. Just this week, had a conversation with a member of our accountability board that said, hey, Ed, you said that you might not want to say it like this. Yeah, thank you. Yes, please let me know because I'm in process too, right? All right. We're all here on level ground of God's amazing grace, right? All right, so what about our enemies? What about those who don't like us or who mistreat us or just because we might follow Jesus? Well, I'm glad you asked. Glad you asked. Here's where our community is radical. Verse 17. Do not pay anyone evil for evil. Like, it's not complicated, right? It's no. Like, the answer is no. Anytime you want to ask, well, should I stab someone in the back? No. Nope. Listen to this. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, it's not always possible, but if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, you can't control that other person, but as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends. I love that he put that in there. You know, he's not like, hey, my friends, dear friends, brothers and sisters, don't take revenge. Leave that to God. Leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. I mean, this is where it's like faith. Like, we're putting our trust in God who made this promise that he will. On the contrary, this quote from Proverbs, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. I have never obeyed this. To my knowledge, I have never consciously obeyed this. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. I don't know, like on the football field, like it may help the guy. I try to at least teach my boys. I'm coaching the line this year, which is crazy because I've never coached a line. But I'm trying. Hey, you pancake someone, pick them up. Pick them up. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Now, I have heard, sounds kind of funny, right? I have heard this quoted many times. I've heard it taken a few different ways, but I think the best way to understand what Paul is saying is that we can trust God to bring judgment. We don't have to. At the bottom line is we can trust God to judge someone who's doing wrong. We don't have to do that. Now, coals of fire in the Old Testament consistently refers to judgment. So it's taken a couple different ways. One way that people take it is that it's a good thing you're heaping those coals of fire because they would carry coals, when it was cold, and then they would carry it to their home to have the fire. I've heard that. It could be that way, but it just doesn't really seem to fit the context. It's just kind of an obscure way of taking it, and it's usually these words are used in judgment. So just in case that wasn't clear, Paul ends by saying this. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, good is not like we had some ice cream last night and it was really good. So good is a moral word. So it's like holy. So how do we know what's good? Well, there has to be a standard for what's good, and God is the standard. He's perfectly holy, and so God's goodness is his moral perfection. So, overcome evil. I mean, think about it. Evil. Well, what is evil? Overcome evil with holiness. Overcome evil with righteousness. And think about this in the context of relationships where people are different. And so, overcome the evil that we see, like on the news. Like, I don't know where you're on the political. I don't care if you're far right, far left, somewhere in the middle, not sure, whatever. Like, this is a pretty intense time right now in our country, and it's only going to get more intense. So I'll listen to something on the radio or I'll read some tweet or something, and I'm constantly want to say something. And I want to go on a video, like, hey, Restoration Church, I don't know if you heard this, but you can't, how could you believe, I want to argue it. I'm like, no, I don't think that would honor God. How about, instead of getting into that whole political debate, we find some women who are pregnant that don't want their babies, and we help them get those babies adopted. How about just reach to your neighbor and just do something that's right for your neighbor? Just serve somebody in your neighborhood. If you're a creature of habit, I like to be a creature of habit, so I go to the same Starbucks usually, and I haven't gone to one in a while where I used to go, and I just don't like it because, quite frankly, it's near a high school, and there's just teenagers always in there, and it is so annoying, and that's a terrible thing for me to say. But it's just, and they'll come in there all loud, and I just don't want to even be tempted to judge them. So I go to a different one. So it's all close in Germantown. And so I went to the other one, and I hadn't seen Wanda in a while. And I walked in. As soon as I walked in, oh, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. And I was like, hey, Wanda. And we talked for a while, And I get to know people in there. And there are like regulars in there. Anyway, there's a story, but I won't tell you because time, we got to move. Now, rather than lash back at a coworker, we may be tempted to lash back at a coworker, right? A family member, fellow church member, or even online. Consider the best way to get rid of an enemy. Do you know the best way, the absolute best way to get rid of an enemy? What's that? Make them your friend. And once they're your friend, you've gotten rid of an enemy, right? Now, is that possible? I still debate this till this day, but my best friend growing up was Terry. Some of you maybe have met Terry. I think Rod and Annie, you've met him. He claims that the way that we met is that I threw a snowball and hit him in the head. And I was hanging out with some big guys, and only because of that, he didn't come, beat my butt, which he would have. He would have totally killed me. And because of that, we became friends. Enemies, friends. Now, I do not have any memory of this, but that's what he says. Relationships are everything, y'all. And while Paul addresses how to respond to the evil, the heart of this passage is authentic love among the gathering of God's people. Yes, we do that here on Sundays. We talked about that, kind of painted that picture of what that could look like. But we really want to drive this home in smaller groups, and here we call them community groups. Michael Kelly, he sums this up really well. He says this, quote, "Our faith is personal, but it is not intended to be private. Our horizontal relationship should develop just as our vertical relationship with God does. Transformation is occurring when relational maturity is evident in our lives." Relational maturity. So I'm growing in my ability to relate, I think especially to people who are different. Just think about, in marriage, that happens, right? My spouse is very different. Are we growing in love? We're growing in, relational maturity. So, we're a few weeks away from launching our fall community groups. So excited. And maybe, some of you have been meeting, like tonight we've been doing like some Sunday night gatherings and stuff. We're going to do that one last time tonight. If you don't have anything going on tonight, feel free to come over. One last drinks and dessert. By the way, Laura and Ephraim made a chocolate tres leches yesterday. Holy cow. I don't know if it's authentic to anything in Mexico or not. We got introduced to this from Anthony and Jenny, but Manny, God, dog, and Manny, and so Ephraim had this like school assignment, and so he's been on this, and so it looks amazing. I don't know if it's any good, but it looks amazing, so feel free to come over. All right, so I just want to get last few minutes to give you some updates about what we're doing, and then we'll put this into action. Okay, so number one, Ross White is, give it up for Ross. Give it up for Ross. Yes, Ross is our new community groups coordinator. You may not have known that, but he has now taken over the leadership of our community groups. Ross is a part of our accountability board, and along with his fabulous, beautiful wife, Dell, he has been a dedicated owner here at Restoration Church almost from the beginning. Ross is going to just share a word. Just from right there. Or come on up, man. Come on.
I'm used to being in front of you.
Oh, here. No, this is on video here. We got to get you. Make this official.
It's awfully hard to follow Ed's sermons. I mean, it's interesting because I don't know about you, but I was thinking a lot about some of my own personal stories when you mentioned certain things. I said, oh yeah, I did that, or I didn't do that. And one of the great things about community groups is you really do get a chance to share that with people because you're more comfortable really in a setting where you're with people that you care about. And we've been fostering relationships in these community groups for quite a while. Some of them have been going a little longer than others. Ed's been doing one for a couple of years now. Natalie and Amir are going to be starting one pretty soon at their house. So if you want to connect, I lead one at Tom and Debbie's house. They're over in East Village area. You're up in Germantown. I'm not sure where your place is. Rockville. Okay. And then Marcy, of course, is right over in Copley. Okay. Yeah. And so we're spread out all over the place. And I would just urge you to, if you haven't already connected in a community group, please do it. The one that I lead, we've been doing this even before we got involved here at Restoration, so we've kind of been grandfathered in. And I really, really enjoy when I get together. We're going to get together this Monday. And I really just enjoy getting together with people in a small group, in a community group, where you can kind of share your feelings. And the longer you get to know people, the more you're willing to share with people kind of concerns that you wouldn't do normally just in a setting like this. And we read a book called Sticky Church that really combined the idea of the community within the church itself here at the service on Sunday with the community group concept. And they find that churches that do this model tend to stick together more. They tend to have people not go out what they call the back door, meaning, you come in, you stay a little bit, and then you leave. And I think this church is so fantastic. When I came on board here, I feel that this is really going to be a great thing. And part of that great thing is the community group concept. So please do that. If you have any questions, please ask me. And we're still developing the program. And we believe really that the concept of relationships is way more important really than the curriculum. We think that what you study is important, but it's not the highest thing on the list. The highest thing on the list is, are you really connecting with people? Are you being open and community? Are you caring about people? And one of the ways to do that is to study the Word and to do things that tend to help our vision as a church, reaching out to other people and things like that, the community within here and within the Lakelands community. So we're really excited about kicking this thing off in about a month. Again, if you want to join one, please talk to any of the leaders. And I'm a resource, and of course Ed is a resource too.
So just to clarify, Natalie and me are hosting, and Brian with Marcelo will be facilitating that group. So real excited, praying that for Elder Alfredo, as we said, to start a Spanish-speaking group here sooner than later, and hopefully another new group here in the Lakelands in the next year. So Germantown, we meet Sunday evenings. We'll be bi-weekly. Eastgate, you guys are bi-weekly as well, right? Every other week, twice a month, second, fourth week. Marcy, you guys meet, so Marcy leads a women's group, which is Sunday nights?
It started out initially Monday nights, and we're going to probably try to
Okay, good. Yep. Great. Awesome. So excited about that. So here's what I want you to do, and then we're going to pray. We're going to do this. If you're not currently part of a group, just want you to pray about committing to a group. And here's the deal, for 10 weeks. Like, commit for 10 weeks. And even you may not be able to make it every week or whatever, but just make that kind of initial commitment and just see how it goes. And if you come to my group and you're like, ooh, I don't want to be in that group with the pastor, then go to another group. And then we want to have easy on-ramp, easy off-ramp. It is weird. It's even weird for me. I'd rather just host it or whatever, but that's coming. And then secondly, share your commitment to pray on a connection card so we can pray and share with you. We're just kind of family here, but that's important. So take that step to let us know on your connection card. Talk to Ross. In the next couple weeks, so we don't have all the details for you yet, but we'll have printed information back on the back table, and we're also working on, Ross is going to help with all of our leaders to get all the information updated on the website and all that, so we can share that, invite people into that, and we'll have that up and going shortly, and then sign up. So we're very excited this year. Ross and I will kind of collaborate together Friday the 13th. So I hope you're not superstitious. We mentioned that today. I didn't even realize that. But Friday, September 13th, we're going to do kind of a training, inspiration time for our group leaders, for if you're considering being a group leader, apprentice leader, host, family member, neighbor, drag somebody along and be inspired about groups. And then we'll launch them that Sunday. Let's pray.